Hello and welcome to my review of A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships by the 1975. I'm super excited to be reviewing this album. Been looking forward to it for quite a long time, being kind of a big 1975 fan. Yeah, so listen well to what my views on it are, if you want. Very, very different from the first album, and indeed the second album. In terms of the content and kind of the style. However, Matty Healy as ever remains very, very brutally honest, which is something what I personally really love about the 1975, is the frank honesty that he delivers, his kind of outlook on life really to the listener. I think that's what makes it so good and so engaging, is you know that Healy is not bullshitting you at really any point unless he wants to, and then it's kind of explicit when he's kind of mucking you around. It doesn't happen often. He's quite frank and quite honest, which again is something I really like about the 1975. I think they've been quite experimental with this album. So the first track, of course, is that usual take on their opener, which they've done for the last three albums. I guess they've always said that this would be part of the Music for Cars chapter for the 1975. However, they've kind of changed up that message by saying they're going to release three albums back to back, pretty much, in the space of a very short time. So this is the first of three, I believe, that they're going to drop, but I'll have to double check that. I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. But yeah, anyway, the first track they've released on the album is of course the self-titled track, the 1975. They kind of stick to the same lyrics as they have done for the first two albums, and they've really shaken it up, and I actually really, really loved this first track. I think it's got a real solid groove to it, which I've actually really enjoyed in their recent singles that they've dropped off this album, and it's just quite experimental, quite groovy, quite funky. I like it. It's also very chill and very mellow, and I think it sets off a great tone for the album actually. It sets it to a very high standard, which is what I thought. With Give Yourself a Try, I remember the first time we heard it actually. It was listening to the Radio 1 Mac track basically of the night where they played the brand new music, and they had the whole band in, and me and my bro sat down and we were like, yes, we're so ready for it. And then they played it, and there was this really damn abrasive guitar sound. It was like the guitar was massively louder than even Matty's vocal, or it just wasn't balanced. I don't know what was going on. And it also sounded a bit like that Joy Division track, but I don't know if they've got the rights to it. We're blasting the tune and they were all really happy with it. And then George, who is the drummer and he produced the album largely, said, oh, that guitar's a bit loud. It's kind of like, did you not listen to the track outside of the studio? Did you not put it in a car or, you know, somewhere with speakers? I just can't believe that the drummer would say on national radio that the guitar was a bit loud about his own work. And then a few hours later, when it got put on Spotify, I felt like they maybe had lowered the volume of the guitar, but I don't know if that's just me going a bit crazy. Who knows? Could well have been, I guess. If you ain't happy, you could just probably recall it and change it and then resend it as a matter of urgency. Anyway, I won't slag it off anymore because I was just really startled, but that sound really grates on me, and actually out of everything the 1975 have done, that's something that I've been most disappointed with, is the kind of lairiness of that tune. And just if they just turned down the guitar a little bit, it would have probably been a great tune, to be honest. And it is alright, but not their finest moment, to be fair. However, I'm willing to forgive them because then they wrote Love It If We Made It and, you know, immediately redeemed, so it's fine. Then, of course, you've got Two Time, which is one that I've heard a lot of radio DJs complain about in terms of title. However, I think it's quite a good jam. It's kind of got like a early 90s, late 80s bop to it. It's quite dancey, it's really fun, you can move to it. It's kind of nonchalant and boppy, but as usual, it delivers that kind of frankness that we love about Healy's lyrics. So can't complain there. I knew what I was getting with that track when I saw it on the track list, so I was quite happy with that one. How to Draw Petrichor? I'm not entirely sure how to say that one. Maybe I should look that up. FYI, How to Draw Petrichor. Sounds really delicate for like a minute and a half, which I quite liked. You know, that usual 1975 twinkly kind of soundscapey setup. And then it gets a little bit weirder. So, you know, standard 75, you've got the kind of vocoder effect, the layers of vocals, it's really, really nice. And then suddenly it gets into a really hyperactive kind of sound. kind of like loads of AI robots, or maybe the machines and technology going wrong, which I think is kind of what the band wanted to encapsulate with this album. It is all about society and its relationship with social media. The whole album is called A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships, which makes a lot of sense, to be honest. So they've really tried to channel through that trend by incorporating kind of machine glitching kind of sounds, some interesting synths, but it's also got a real good solid rhythmic beat to it. It sounds kind of cool, not really my vibe, not really my bag, but I know someone out there will really like appreciate it. And it is the 1975, they are trying to push things further, be a bit more experimental than just releasing, you know, kind of generic pop songs, which I guess the last album may be interpreted as being slightly more so. However, I freaking love the last album, so maybe I just love straight up pop, who knows. Love It If We Made It. Do not get me started on that tune. I think it's a massive anthem. I think it's maybe one of the most important tracks that we've witnessed in 2018 in terms of kind of making a statement about the way the world is going. And of course, that's kind of what social media is. So I heard from somewhere that Healy kind of pulled a load of tweets, and that's what the premise of the lyrics for the song was. So of course you've got the random tweets like "Poison Me Daddy" and stuff like that, and "Thank you Kanye, very cool." Good old Trump. So he's kind of taken tweets or phrased things in a way that you maybe would just read them on Twitter, which is really interesting. And I think it touches on a lot of stuff. It touches on like things as far as far-flung as pop culture to some really serious topical news subjects. And I think it kind of encapsulates what's been going on recently. It's chaotic and manic, however, it's such a good song. There's pure emotion in it. It's kind of everything I love in a deep, meaningful song. Emotion, and great lyrical content that I could probably write a literature essay about, let's face it. I am that kind of person, I would go there. Maybe I should. Anyway, I'm not going to bore you with that now. That is a jam. That is probably my favourite album on the track. And in fact, it might well be, for me, the entire redeeming album-worthy track. Because although, in hindsight, and this is a review of kind of like my first listen to it, so that could well change very soon. It did certainly with the last album. I think that for me, currently, that track is the bomb, and I think they weren't going to top it anywhere else on the album, but you know, each to their own. Some people really love the other stuff. Yeah, I watched a really interesting Genius music video, which includes an interview with Matt Healy about the lyrics of Love It If We Made It, which was properly interesting, because that is a song for me that has a lot of lyrical depth, and I actually wanted him to kind of analyse and pull out the references that he makes in the track, because as an ex-lit student, I really want to hyper-analyse that song. So it's nice for Healy to like take bits and to refer to it. However, I feel like in that interview, although he talks about a lot of public things, when it gets to like personal subjects, obviously he shies away from it, because as I've heard, a lot of his lyrical content is inspired by people he actually knows or experiences he actually had, and I know he's been going through quite a bizarre year in which he befriended a horse on a Caribbean island. Anyway, if you want to read about that, I recommend that Enemy article where they're all dressed like kind of kids characters. Healy's got some cute little bunny ears on, and yeah, they look like they're from Where the Wild Things Are. But I recommend that article. It's really interesting if you want a deeper insight into the formation of that album. It's worth a read, and the Genius videos are worth a watch if you want to hear Healy's perspective on the tracks. Be My Mistake, that was a track that was surprisingly mellow, like really chill, really, really calm for the 1975. I don't see them as a band that's the kind of let's get the acoustic guitar out sort of outfit, because they've never really been that to me. I know Matt Healy back in the day when he started out, I think he did some reality TV show or something, and he did a cover of Jeff Buckley's Take on Hallelujah with an acoustic guitar, and that is kind of the same sort of vibe I'm getting from this track. Obviously it's not to the level of Buckley because he's a freaking god, but it's definitely the kind of vibe they're going for, I think. They want just something really stripped back, mellow. It's still got pepperings of that classic 1975 sound, which is of course the twinkling kind of synths and kind of sweet sounds amidst like some quite bassy depth. However, the song's really simple, but it's really nice. It's quite a straight up number, to be honest. It's not normally something they go for. I quite enjoyed it this time though, so that was really nice to hear a quite acoustic sounding track on the album. Sincerity is Scary, another great tune. I'm really digging it. I really love the 1975 when they get funky. So when they do it, I'm pretty happy. It doesn't get better than that for me. I like some syncopation, I like a bit of gospel, and I know they've been doing it pretty well. There's nothing really more to say about that. It's a great bop again. There's lots of clever wordplay. Again, Healy keeps it honest. And I really like the brass embellishments. It's really arty and really nice. I like America and America Likes Me. There's some bassy melody with a straight up trap, which was a bit unexpected. Can't complain though, I do like trap music. However, for the 1975, it's not always something you just immediately associate. In fact, with this song, I kind of felt like they took lots of popular things right now. So they took kind of the trap sound effects on board and they incorporated it. They also included glitchy and kind of high-pitched vocals, which again is very popular in kind of 2018 pop music, I think. They've kind of pushed it together, mashed it up, and then amplified it, turned it up to like 100. So they've kind of blown all the popular, typical kind of pop components of this year and made it into something kind of alien, kind of weird, which is what I would expect of the 1975. I'd expect them to do that. I would expect them to take it and twist it and make it their own, because if they didn't, it wouldn't be the 75 and it wouldn't be as innovative as their usual standard. I totally got what they were going for on it, and I understand. However, I felt like times, this is again my first listen, I felt like it was a little bit messy. Didn't really think it was as well executed as they would usually do. But I don't know if that's the pressure of saying, right, we're gonna whack out 3 albums in such a small space of time. That for me could well be the reason that it was kind of weird. But, you know, who knows? It could be like the last album, which I, on first listen, I was like, it sounds kind of similar to their very first album. And I was like, sounds a bit repetitive, not feeling it. However, like 6 months down the line, I was eating those words, one of my favourite albums now. I like it when you sleep, for you're so beautiful yet so unaware of it. Anyway, back to a brief inquiry into online relationships. So that song, I Like America and America Likes Me. Good, bit weird, I'll go with it. The Man Who Married a Robot / love theme. That was an interesting one. So, you know, I thought I was going to be in for like another experimental instrumental track for the 1975, because that's something they included a lot on the previous album. However, I was met with the voice of Siri, which when I'm listening to the album when it first comes out, I don't know, 12:30 at night, I was not anticipating Siri on the record. And I'd read somewhere that Siri was going to be involved, but I was like, wow, really, this is it. Kind of a weird story and quite a sad story, because it is just a frank account of what the internet kind of is these days, as people go to it for everything, even to some extent their emotional relationships. And it was kind of it's kind of like a comedy / kind of dark comment, kind of a bit like a Black Mirror episode of a track, in my opinion. You know, like there's a bit of social commentary going on there, and it's actually looking through like modern life through a really dark lens. And that is what you get in like dystopian fiction and stuff like that, and exactly what you get in Black Mirror is kind of like a pessimistic outview. However, they've done it in a track, which is quite inventive, but like I said earlier, I would not expect anything different. Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting. It was quite sad, and you're actually genuinely interested in what Siri has to tell you in terms of story-wise, because it is a bit like a narrative. You get a beginning, a middle and an end, and unfortunately the ending ain't great, and it kind of says you can visit his Facebook page and signs off, and that is kind of how it is for a lot of things in life. For instance, if you have a business or a track or you're making something like this, you might be like, oh yeah, check out my page. And then you kind of sign off, because that's kind of your final word on the thing. And that's exactly how that song ends. So it is an interesting statement about online relationships, but if it wasn't, why would we call the album that, you know? So it makes perfect sense, really. I enjoyed that tune. It was a bit weird, but probably not one that I'll play when I'm going running or whatever, but the premise was good. In Inside Your Mind, which was quite a weird track, Healy definitely fancies himself as a bit of a 1980s crooner. Sounds like a weird thing, but there's kind of this bizarre, almost power ballad cheese to that track that I can't quite shake. So I'm not a massive fan of that one. However, I know some people are gonna flipping love it. The guitar again is really abrasive, which kind of reminded me of Give Yourself a Try. Kind of grates on me a little bit. That flaming guitar, which is slightly a bit louder than it should be, maybe, is back on it again. However, it's not to the level that the first release of this album was. Like, nowhere near as intense. So I'm kind of grateful about that. Kind of makes my skin crawl overall inside your head. I don't really know why. I think it could be just the pure cheese of it. But it also could be because Healy is kind of singing in his lower range, and it doesn't do it all the time, so it's really bizarre that he like does it for the whole song. Kind of reminds me a bit of a tortoise, you know? That kind of snaily kind of speed. You know, could grow on me. Open-minded at this time. It's Not Living If It's Not With You is a tune that I really like, maybe because it does hark back to the previous melodies of their prior work, where they kind of take melody lines from the very first self-titled album and kind of recycle them and upcycle them. I feel like that's used a tiny amount on this track, and actually they haven't done it a lot on this album, which is quite a radical change for the 75. I really like the kind of poppy sound, the kind of positive sound. They're obviously talking about a really serious topic, as Healy's been through quite a lot in the last year, and he likes to draw upon his own life experiences and those around him. So, you know, it's going to be raw and honest as usual, but it's got this really upbeat melody. I really am a sucker for like cute backing vocals, and I don't mean cute in a demeaning, patronising way. I mean cute as in this kind of overall uplifting way, kind of way that I would easily be able to sing along to it too. So for that, I'm grateful, and I really like that song actually. Some people think it's a bit cheese because it's quite 80s again. You've got the classic keyboard kind of sounds that the 80s kind of brought with it. I've used a few times on this album so far, but it's not overly done. I quite like it. It's kind of classy. It's kind of a hark back to vintage times. It's a bop with some seriousness, which kind of creates that irony that the 1975 do so well. Surrounded by Heads and Bodies was another acoustic number, which was quite startling. It's stripped back, kind of emo, takes some unexpected melody turns, which is kind of refreshing. It's compelling, really interesting in the turns that it takes, so I kind of was kept on my toes throughout the entire first listen. I didn't think it was going to go that particular way, and it did sometimes. I like a kind of emo-y acoustic sounding song, so that's all good for me. Mine kind of reminded me of a dreamy Pixar film. Like, I like to imagine Healy and company kind of walking along a suburban, kind of white picket fenced street, maybe, you know, clear blue skies in the background. Healy could even be holding a bunch of balloons. It was that kind of level of soft Pixar vibes that I got, because there was kind of this cafe jazz feel to that track. And I do love that genre of music actually. There's something kind of sweet and sensitive about it that I appreciate. And I felt like they really brought it to life in mine. It's kind of dreamy, which is something they do great. And yeah, it was romantic in a weird way, kind of orchestral sounding, a bit different to what they usually do. Could easily imagine it in a film. Obviously, maybe not with Matty's vocals in it, but you know, I like that song, so it's nice. I Couldn't Be More in Love was a song that made me feel deeply uncomfortable, purely in the fact that it had the 1980s keyboard turned right the way up. It's almost as if Matty was like, okay lads, let's record a really strange 80s ballad. And so they did, and not something I particularly love. It gives it a lot more on the vocals, which is really nice. There's like some real deep reaching going there. But I just cannot handle the combination of the weird 80s keyboard and the gospel choir in the background. I think it almost makes it too 80s. I feel like you could almost pull it out of Sister Act or something like that at times. The melody is nice, but it's just a little bit too cheesy for me, which, you know, is subjective. So you might find that to be a great tune, but for me, can't quite deal with that one for the time being. The final track of the album, I Always Wanna Die Sometimes, is another kind of simple acoustic sounding track, and it's got that kind of sad, bitter but kind of humorous irony in it at the same time. It's another acoustic track. They've actually done like, I think it's 3 tracks they do which are quite acoustic heavy sounding, which is not expected for the 75. They seem to have cut back on solid instrumentals and replaced those tracks with acoustic numbers, or even orchestral pieces to some extent. That song starts off acoustic and simple, but then it goes in a really bizarre direction. It kind of reminds me of early thousands indie rock music. So you know, like Radiohead's High and Dry, it kind of reminds me a bit of that, and that was a bit of a startling moment for all of us, like not just because I sang in the video, but also because I did not anticipate the 1975 to ever go in that direction. The reason that genre of music has not been popular in 2018 is because it kind of stopped. Like, bands could not keep releasing that kind of music now. it was like really incredible. Like, I'm not slagging off Radiohead to any level because they are great, but it's kind of something very much of that era, so it just feels a bit displaced being created now with like a fresh outlook. I can't quite convey what I mean. It was strange, big indie rock chorus, but it just doesn't feel very modern or progressive. It feels almost like a step back from the 75. It's a weird song, I don't hate it, one I can deal with, but it's just really unexpected and a little bit off the wall for 1975. You know, if I heard it out of context of that album and didn't see it as a 1975 track, I wouldn't anticipate it being a 1975 song, because it's just so out of character. At the end, to kind of tie off the album, or rather to leave the album on a cliffhanger, as a lot of people would, they've kind of left this unsettling orchestral music. So you kind of feel like, imagine you're in space on a lonely planet and you don't really know what's going to happen. You know how you'd kind of get that music that kind of leaves you on the edge? That's kind of the end of the album. They've kind of done this big orchestral sound, and it's kind of like it's from a kid's movie when something worrying is going to happen, and that's the way they left it, which kind of goes well because, as we all know, this is only the first album of a potential 3, and they want to leave you on a cliffhanger. They want to leave you with that feeling of this album cycle is not complete. This is not the end of this era. You want to hear what's coming next, so as do I. I can't wait to hear more bops, even if there's only 4 or 5 massive tunes on a 15-track album that I like love. That's still 5 more tunes than I had last week, for instance. Do you know what I mean? So I'm excited to hear what they've got coming next. Thank you so much for listening to my spiel on the 1975 A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships. I hope to be making more of these little commentaries or first listen reviews on the regular when I see fit, which should be more often. Feel free to subscribe. Who knows what will appear in the near future. Bye now.